We started Culturally Speaking to indulge our curiosity about the way others live and a desire to inspire conversations about how we have far more in common than we realise. Okay, so today's episode with Craig, I think we've never had a guest like Craig. I don't think we've ever spoke to anyone who's got his background. I think first off, we both have to say our minds completely dipped into like drugs and pop culture when we heard what he was going to talk about, right?
Yeah.
I think it's been on our screens, I'd say quite a lot in recent times, and even before that. I think with the likes like Breaking Bad, Narcos, I mean, we can talk about Narcos all day, but the glamorization of the drug world.
Oh, 100%. And I think in the UK, I remember watching Skins. Right?
Yes.
And I think it was targeted for us when we were that age, right? It was on, was it Channel 4? But
I think it was, yes. Yeah.
I would actually say that I was too young to have watched it.
I was definitely too young for the early seasons.
Yeah.
Because I was like a tween. I wasn't even really a teenager. And I knew about it.
Yeah, so I feel like for people who haven't watched Skins, I would actually say go watch it. Pretty good TV show. But it's things like that, and then you've got Trainspotting, which is like a world acclaimed film about essentially heroin addiction. Yeah, and I kind of feel like, was it interesting to watch and maybe try to understand what it's like to be in that world? Yes, but I also think that made it more acceptable almost.
And that's the thing, isn't it? There's this real push to have what we watch mirror daily life. But at the same time, by making things, and I say this in inverted commas, acceptable, like in Skins, like the very casual drug use of teenagers was just part and parcel of life, was the way it was depicted, right? And that might be true. I'm not debating that is the truth for some people, but is that something that we should also encourage? Because everybody was cool and everybody had this sort of nonchalance to what was essentially illegal activity for most children that age, right? They were children. I think it's important to say that. But yeah, the glamorization of it is something that I think we can distinguish between the glamour and the reality.
Glamorization, right? Back to our favorite show, like Gossip Girl, the original Gossip Girl. Nobody that I know at that age would have done those things. You know?
No, and there's also a distinct lack of parental supervision. It's the same in Skins. There is no parental supervision.
Yeah.
Or figures of it doesn't have to be
which may be a lot of people's realities, right? Because that's a whole other topic of the role of the parent in modern society. And obviously some people unfortunately grew up without any, right? So I think back to the drugs thing, I think there's been a lot of, it used to make me laugh, right? I'm always amused when I see films where people, snort a line of cocaine and then suddenly they feel like the king of the world and then they're screaming and whooping and suddenly they can do everything. And I'm kind of like, I'm not really sure. I mean, I don't know, right, firsthand, but I don't think that's what happens. Like, to me, once you enter that kind of seedy underworld of drug taking and everything, I don't think things are as great as they seem. And the only thing that's accurate about all of that is that a lot of drug-related things actually happen in much more obvious places, especially in the city. I think it's not necessarily criminals who do it, is what I'm trying to say.
No, and I think that's that sort of white collar almost acceptance of it in parts of the city, right? It was rife at certain times. It still exists.
Well, and also, isn't it interesting that even within drugs, there is a hierarchy. There's a classist hierarchy.
Completely. Yes. You took the words out of my mouth. It's exactly what I was going to say. And your entry point in and progression within it as well.
I almost feel like cannabis is the ultimate gateway drug for everybody. Like, for some people, you know, if people have seen Louis Theroux's documentaries, like, I think he had a few. For some of them, it could be prescription medication. That's their gateway. But I almost feel like for, at least in the UK, for recreational drug users, let's call them that, it's always cannabis. And that is getting more and more easy to access. And in some American states, it's become legal. And then there's the rise of the CBD, which I don't understand.
I wondered how long it would take us to get onto CBD.
Yeah, because that's a whole... I don't know. Like, I don't like to be too judgmental. You know, I know that cannabis can be used medically for a lot of things. I've seen videos of people with Parkinson's using it, and because it does kind of calm down the nerves, it helps, right? So I'm not debating the legit medical side of this, but I remember going to this health expo quite a few years ago before COVID, so it was like an in-person thing, and they already had things like CBD cream for eczema and things like that. And I tried a little bit on my hand, and I don't have eczema, but I'll be honest, I didn't feel any different. It was just cream. So I don't know.
Yeah, in something like that, where I'm always really interested between placebo and reality. Because how much of it is us thinking we should feel something?
Yeah.
Because you described, like, oh, you know, in a movie, someone takes a line of coke and then, you know, they're completely off their face. Well, it probably, I mean, it does affect different people differently, right? Like, not everybody's going to drop dead and have a heart attack.
Yeah.
And not everybody is going to be bouncing off the walls. There is going to be a spectrum. But how much of the way people react to it is conditioned by what they think they should feel?
But that's the thing. I almost feel like... Have you seen Pulp Fiction?
Yes.
Right? You know the scene where Uma Thurman just drops dead, essentially, and gets an EpiPen in her heart. And I'm kind of like, okay, first of all, I'm not a medical professional, but a normal EpiPen I thought was meant to go in your leg. Maybe if you're dying, it goes in your chest. I don't know. But I almost feel like we shouldn't have to need these things, right? Because we should be intelligent people. But when it comes to things like drug overdose and things that normal people don't come across day to day, we do need a more accurate depiction of what actually happens. Because look at you and me, like, we're talking about something we've never done, right? So we can only really guess and you know, a guesstimate of what do we do if we see this or that, or, you know, what happens. But the glamorization of all of these things in films and TV shows, I think ultimately may lead to more accidents because we don't know what it's like, you know. And then you look at Louis Theroux documentaries and then you're like, okay, I'm never touching that because clearly it's really bad for you. But we don't see enough of those. We see, I think, generally drugs as a cool and fun thing. I say we, not you and I, but, you know, the world.
Yeah, I do agree. And I think it's also down to, I mean, think about the way smoking was depicted 50, 60 years ago in TV shows. I mean, you know, I love Mad Men. I'm an avid fan. I
think that was reflective of how society saw it, though, because they came up with cigarettes for women and, like, actually people thought it was good.
Completely agree. And now when we watch something like Mad Men, I mean, people make fun of it, right? They're like, oh, 30 seconds on screen and Don needs a cigarette, like, you know. But with that, there was obviously massive education campaigns. The science behind, the effects of smoking really came to the fore in the decades that came after that. But with drugs, there wasn't. I mean, yes, I know we've talked about the war on drugs, but it doesn't really feel like it's a battle anyone's winning. And part of that is to do with the money, right, as well. I mean, we forget about the huge amounts of money that change hands globally. I mean, these are corporations. These are multinational billion-dollar corporations.
But I think it's because you see more people smoking on the street than you would people shooting up.
I think it depends where you live.
No, I know, but as a global phenomenon, right? Like smoking was so pervasive in those decades that imagine if like out of 100 people, 80 people smoked, right? You just needed to say out of these 80 people, 75 of them die. Then the campaign is done. Right?
But is it that drugs have always been behind closed doors, so to speak?
I think so. And also it's less accessible. Unless you're talking about street drugs like I don't know, cannabis is probably easier, but you were never able to buy them in a shop. They were never legalized. I think that's the problem. So you don't know the extent of what, the people doing it.
I find as well the conversation around should we legalize Class C drugs in the UK, so Class C being marijuana particularly, I think is
I don't know what else. I don't really know what else is in Class C.
But I do find that an interesting conversation because, to your point of you can't go and buy it somewhere it's not mainstream in the sense of you still have to procure it in a way that basically skirts the law, right? Today.
Mm-hmm.
But then I wonder in places in the States, in states that have legalized it, is there any difference in the usage and the way people use it? Like, are people using it openly?
I mean, I would say in London people use it openly, even though it's not legal.
Exactly. Well, this is my thing when I said, this is when I said to you, like, although we think drugs have been done behind closed doors, actually, depending on where you live, if you live in large global metropolitan cities, and the chances are you probably do see it day to day. You definitely smell it.
Yeah.
Day to day.
Cigarettes are a visible enemy, right, in quotes. And therefore, the government has a reason to put posters up of like, oh, look at your lungs after you smoke. It's going to look rotten. And, they can very proactively have a smear campaign against a visible enemy. But when drugs are illegal, they can't then put up a poster to say this is what happens to you if you do it, because it's almost like I feel like there is a concern around making this aware to people who wasn't originally aware of it. You know what I mean? Like it's an invisible enemy. So talking about it more, maybe worse.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, there's a lot of arguments to and for, right? Yeah. Should we legalize it? Should we not?
I think generally speaking, I'm not obviously pro taking drugs, but I almost feel like legalizing things at least puts it into a framework where it's visible, right? So even though, yes, on the one hand, you will still keep telling people it's not good for you to do this, but on the other hand, at least you can make sure if people are doing it, they're not, taking things that are cut with other things. Do you know what I mean? Like there's a bit of quality control. Because they do prescribe drugs, right, for people coming off of drugs. Like I don't know what they're called, but they help people in rehabs by giving them an alternative.
Yes, to help with the addiction.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Let's listen to Craig.
I live outside of Washington, D.C. I was born in Washington, D.C., and I've lived in Maryland um, most of my life. I grew up in a church home. My dad was a minister, and we essentially, our whole life was built around the church and also built around making dad look good as a minister's son, as a minister's family. Um, and I grew up in that environment. And my sisters and I have two older sisters, and our whole goal was to make my father look good. That was the focus of the Brown family. Make Father Brown look good. And that was a lot of pressure to put on us as young children. My mother was a pastor's wife enabler, making sure that her husband, Father Brown, looked good, and all of us had to perform. And that was what I learned after the fact, and many years later, that it was a rather dysfunctional environment. My dad was somewhat of he had his own demons, he had his own anger issues, and he was somewhat of a narcissist because what I saw from in the church and from the pulpit was entirely different than what I witnessed or experienced behind closed doors. He essentially took that out on myself and my sisters, and we didn't know any better. I mean, when you're younger, you think, "Oh, this is a perfect family." What do you know? I mean, we can't choose our parents. We're in that environment, and it's in that environment that I and all of us have developed coping mechanisms, and we developed escape plans. We developed how do we deal with pain, shame, guilt, failure, betrayal, abandonment. Well, we learn how to do that by developing coping mechanisms, and that was the environment that shaped me, and that was the family life that shaped me to the point that I, in my younger years, but also into my high school years, it was in my high school years that I was really searching. I wasn't getting it from home, so I'm really searching. And so, I was a very talented athlete. I did okay in school, but my social skills and everything else, I mean, I had a lot of friends and what have you, and I needed that in my life, and I was searching for that meaning and purpose. And then I started drinking in high school, and just to parties and things like that. But it was that family environment. It was that rather dysfunctional environment, void of a father figure, someone to lead me, someone to show love, someone to instill in me the principles I would need and build a foundation I would need to be successful later. I didn't have it. I did not have that, and as a result, little did I know I was suffering from that and grieving from that without really even knowing it because I was numbing it. I was, suppressing it. I just felt, well, I guess this is how it is. Until much later on in life when I, had major life change. Looking back and taking inventory of all that, I realized the lack and the void in that foundation, which led me into a rather difficult period in my life and what I describe as the pit of hell experience that I had. When I graduated from high school, um, and I was then off to college, I had no self discipline. I had no self control. I had no purpose or any vision of success that I was going to undertake at school, and I was free. I was free for the first time in my life, free from that environment, that family environment that was very dysfunctional. I was on campus and I was free. And that's a bad combination because when you have freedom, no self-discipline, no self-control, and no guidance, no purpose, bad combination. And so I was supposed to play basketball actually in college. I should have played college basketball. But again, I didn't have any direction or any support in that way. And I just went to the party, instead of going to class. I went to the party instead of going to practice. And that was really the starting place of my journey into the pit of hell. So I dropped out of college after my freshman year, and I went back home to Washington, D.C. And I took a number of different jobs, but I ended up in this one job at a restaurant and a bar that was owned by the biggest cocaine dealer on the East Coast in the early 1980s. And in the early 80s in the United States, cocaine was dominating the party scene. It was everywhere. It was like, it was like food. It was like candy. Everybody had it. And I'm working in this environment that the owner of this business was running a major, major drug trade out of this business. And I got sucked up into that drug world. I did some low level dealing here and there, but for all intents and purposes, he was running this major drug trade and using this business to launder money. And it was as a 19 or 20-year old with no direction, no self control. The party welcomes everybody, and I entered into that environment, and I got just sucked up into that entire lifestyle, and it it ended up being a dark, depressing, very troubling. It was miserable, but in the midst of all that turmoil and pain, I'm looking around, going, how did I end up here? How did this minister's son end up in this environment? And you asked that I've helped thousands of people in what I've been doing now over the last 22 years in Christ Center Recovery, and a lot of I hear the same thing. How did I ever end up in that? Well, when you have no direction or you have no real purpose, you'll find it somewhere. If you have that void in your life or that void in your heart, you're going to fill it one way or another. And I just did. I just filled it with all the wrong things. And I made all the wrong decisions, for my life at that time. And I operated in that environment for a number of years. And I mean, I'm not going to share all the details, but numerous car accidents, being arrested for driving on a suspended license, being in the courtroom, just harm to other people, harm done to me. And it was just an absolutely depressing, dark period of my life until I got to the point where I had major, major epiphany and life change that changed my life forever. I have many memories, many of which I have processed, worked through, involving people, situations, circumstances, good, bad, you name it. I have from every end of the spectrum. So, in this environment in Washington, D.C., in the early 80s, it was a who's who, in the party. Uh, there were people from Capitol Hill, very well known people that were running our country or were a part of running the country that would come through this establishment. There were very well known athletes, very well known local TV people, very well known musicians. And you're rubbing elbows and hanging out with people in this lifestyle. Every people were armed, with firearms, and you think nothing of it because you have no value system. You have no core value system with which to for it to be or live under a higher standard. It is what it is. And then you're also hanging with people in all walks of life, in all different professions. And, there were local, we're right in the hub of DC, so you've got universities and major corporations and who's who in this environment. And yes, as a young 19, 20-year-old, you're just enamored with all of that, right? You're just, you romanticize that type of lifestyle and all the lavish parties and the what have you. Um, and there were some very interesting times, no doubt about it. And again, you're in this, and it's all artificial. It's there, and the drug use, the alcohol, the women, all the relationships, it's it's really all artificial because you're so numbed by all the dysfunction. That what is love? What is hope? What is encouragement? What is life all about? Is this it? Is this it? And it was fleeting. It was very fleeting, and it was very short term because you're going on 24-hour cycles, and that's you're not looking, you're not forecasting ahead because you don't know if you'll make it. I mean, I had near death experiences, and okay, that should have shaken me to the core, but it really didn't. It really didn't. You stay for as long as you do in any environment because of fear. Everything we've always wanted in life is on the other side of fear. Everything. And what I have learned, and what I actually, the first chapter in my book, Stop Hiding, Start Healing, is when the pain is greater than your fear. We will change most anything in our life when the pain is greater than our fear of changing. You see, when you're wrapped up, when your identity is of drug use, alcohol, the party scene, when you take on that identity, and that's all you know. That's all you know. And deep inside, I wanted to change. Deep inside, I I longed for happiness and to be set free. But I was scared, but I was afraid. I was afraid to take it to the next level and change my behavior, my thinking, and my circumstances. And I had to get to a point where the pain was so great in my life that I finally overcame my fear and began to heal and began to change. So that's, when people ask, why did you operate in that environment for, whatever, how many years or what have you? Well, for that very reason. I was scared. Yeah, I knew nothing else. And I took that on as my identity. And believe it or not, in our pain, our shame, our guilt, our failure, right? That's our comfort zone. That was my comfort zone. And that's what happens. We are blinded by that when we are in the midst of our struggle. We're blinded by that. And, we don't know if there's, light at the end of the tunnel. We don't know if there is peace and freedom on the other side of this pain. Well, there is. And for the last 22 years of what I've been doing and helping people where I've been, thousands of people, that's my encouragement and my message. Oh, you can change. Absolutely. Oh, you can. There is a way. And it's happened in my life, and it's happened in thousands of people that I've helped over the last 22 years. And here's how. And that's what prompted me to write the book. It's not only fear that keeps us in bondage, it's also shame. Shame comes from the pit of hell, and shame holds and keeps really good people in bondage from prevents them from getting well. Shame is very overpowering, really overpowering, and not just fear. So if someone were to ask me in just how in the areas of which I've been serving for the last 22 years, what is the number one? I would say shame is number one. But when the pain is greater than your fear, you're ready to change. And fear is right there with shame. My process was interesting. It was July 15th, 1985, and I was up for most of the weekend, 3 days or so. And I was coming back from the East Coast in the United States from the beach. And I just had, it was one of those situations. Here's the spiritual component. Um, there were seeds that were planted in my life years ago of my church experience. Seeds were planted. And what we don't understand, and I'm sharing this from my own personal experience, is that God's hand is on us. He is right there at all times, and he doesn't cause our pain. He never ever causes our pain, but he'll allow it, right? To get us to the point where we will stop trying to control, stop trying to change ourselves because we don't have the power to do that. We need help. We need that support. But it was that this one day I had this amazing clarity for the first time in a long time that if I didn't change what I was doing in my life, I was going to end up dead or I'd continue on this life of destruction. And I didn't want that anymore. I did not want that anymore. So this was the first experience of where the pain was a little bit greater than my fear, but it was years later where I had a major breakthrough. So that started it. That was the beginning of the process. Now, you would have thought ending up in the hospital, which I did, or any of the numerous car accidents or injuries or stuff like, you would have thought that would have got my attention, but it did to a degree. But that was part of the process leading me up to that one defining moment, the first one, and that was on that day. And I just realized I've got to get out of here. I've got to get out of here. And I did. Shortly thereafter, I began to extricate myself from that lifestyle, from that environment, from the drugs, the alcohol, and everything related to it. And over the course of weeks and months, I did. I did. And I didn't go to rehab. I didn't know anything about any of that. I just was desperate to get out of it. And that desperation led me to developing a healthier lifestyle, not hanging with that particular group anymore, not being in that environment anymore, and not putting myself in that predicament any longer. I changed a lot of things in my life. And that was the starting place of my major life change. But it wasn't until 6 or 7 years later where I had the what I would call the absolute miracle life change that happened in my life. So I operated without drugs or alcohol for about 6 or 7 years. Okay. Um, I I my self-esteem was and my self-worth and began to, you know, um, become more healthy. There are 4 areas in our life that we're always dealing with, and we're all in um, different health. You know, they're mental, our mental capacity, mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Those 4 areas in our life are all at differing degrees health wise, right? And so for my own life, mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, I was growing and getting healthier, but I was still miserable. I was still absolutely miserable because I had never dealt with my past life. I had never dealt with the trauma, the pain, the shame, the hurt, the guilt, the harm, the people experiences, failure. I hadn't dealt with it. So that was always a burden and it was hanging over my head for all that period of time. Now it's great to be sober and clean, and that's great, but that's not where it ends. You see, sobriety and abstinence are the byproduct of doing the work of the healing, right? When you're able to heal and have your soul restored and and deal with all the pain and whatever you're going through in your life, you no longer need to medicate that any longer. And that's what happened with me. But I got out of that, but I was still, I was still miserable, until I got that phone call from my sister. And she called me up and she said, Dad's dying and we have to get to the hospital. Um, so we rushed to the local hospital, and my dad was in the intensive care unit. He'd had an operation and he was bleeding internally, and they couldn't stop the bleeding. And so I got to the hospital, and my brother-in-law was there first, and I got there, and I'm standing at my dad's bedside, and my entire life came rushing before me at that time, right? I was, I loved my dad, and I knew he loved me, and he had, we just didn't have a nurturing, close, caring, loving relationship. But, and I longed for that from him. But so I got to the by his bedside, and it shook me to the core. Absolutely shook me to the core, because my dad was going to die, and I had done nothing with my life for him to be proud of. I felt like a complete failure. So I just, everything in my life came came rushing before me while I was standing by his bedside. And they didn't know whether he would live or die. It would be a matter of hours before they would be able to know, right? So I left the hospital, and my whole perspective on life began to change. And the very next day, and again, I didn't know anything about a relationship with God. I knew of God. I knew, you know, uh, I had those seeds that were planted early in my life. But like I mentioned in my first chapter, when the pain was greater than my fear, I was ready to change. And my pain level, standing by his bedside, was absolutely um, powerful. I could not take it any longer. So I cried. The next day, I just cried out to God, and I said, I can't do this anymore in my life. I'm a complete failure. I have made, just horrible decisions in my life. I've got this pain. I've got all of this that I've carried all these years, and I can't take it anymore. And here my dad's going to die. I can't take it anymore. And I just cried out. I cried out, and it was absolutely miraculous. It was absolutely miraculous in that when I was done just praying and saying, God, come in and take this pain from me and take over my life, um, the total burden, everything I'd carried for all those years was lifted immediately. It was miraculous. And it was on that day that my true healing and restoration and recovery began. It was on that day. Everything I am today, and I mean everything, is the result of my deepest, darkest pain. Everything. My brokenness, everything I am today as a result of that. I am a better husband because of that. I'm a better father because of it. Um, People helper, friend, and recovery pastor in what I do, in helping others. It has shaped me. It is who I am. It is who I am. When you're in the midst of your pain and your dysfunction and that life, you don't think there's any excuse me, you don't think there's any way out. You just don't think there's any way out. But once you are set free, and once you experience that freedom and that new life, that new purpose and that new mission in life, there's absolutely nothing like it. Now, it's been 36 years since I've ever taken a drug or drank. I mean, it's been 36 years. It's been 28 years in when I had that major life change, and where the burden, the pain, and it was just lifted. but it didn't mean I was healed, completely healed. I had to begin to do the work. I had to begin to take responsibility. I had to be honest with myself and with God and with someone else. I had to stop blaming everyone or everything for my predicament. I wasn't a victim, right? It was my own doing, right? It was my own choices. So that day began an amazing healing process where I was able to, for the first time, come face to face with that trauma, that pain, that shame, and that guilt, and work through that on a step-by-step basis over years and years. And that's been 28 years I've been doing that. But I had this burden to help others who have been to the pit of hell like me. And so I've taken every bit of my experience and everything that I have ever been through, and that has been the catalyst and the foundation from which I serve today and helping other people that struggle. And now I'm not talking just addiction. Life is a struggle. Okay, it can be very, very challenging. It's not always a walk in the park. It's just not. And you have to be honest with that. We can't be rooted in denial. Life is a beautiful place. I mean, it is. And it's coupled with challenges, victories, days at the beach, and valley experiences. It's a beautiful landscape. It really, truly is. But it's far more beautiful, culturally speaking, when you're healed and healing, right? It's far better on that side. And that is my passion and what prompted me to do more by writing a book to maybe be a resource for someone to escape that pit of hell, get out of that pit of hell, just admit that it's there and find the right resources, the right people, the safe people, the trusted people, the right place for you to go and no longer be captivated and bondage to fear and shame, to step up, step out, and start your healing process. And by all means, stop hiding. Stop hiding it and speak up and begin your healing process. And that's my passion in helping others do that. What God did in my life, right? What he did and has done ever since is absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. Now, I've been th- I've been through some very, very painful experiences since that time, right? And I've been some, you know, just relationship challenges, or people challenges, or business challenges, or whatever that may be. Some financial challenge. I've been through some tough stuff still, over the years. And all I've been able to do is rely on what got me out of that, before. And it's that, just that grace and that mercy that God gives each and every one of us as a gift when we ask for that. And that's what gives me complete hope. I have so much hope today. I have so much hope and anticipation and expectation of every single day as a gift. Every single day is a gift, right? And my gift to God is what I do with this 24 hours. My gift to him is, all right, let me be useful. Let me help just one person. Let me be there to smile at someone, some stranger, or be kind to someone and make their day. We don't know what that person is going through, right? I've had people treat me poorly or this or that, and I don't even react. I don't even react. In the old days, you would not want to be around me. You would not want to be around me. I'm 6'4", 230 pounds, man, and you did not want to be anywhere near me if you did me wrong. Trust me. So opposite today, so opposite, because he has calmed my storm. He has calmed my storm. So there's nothing that can get past me. I've been in 22 years of helping people, and I'm talking about all kinds of issues, and they're all beautiful. Every single person is absolutely beautiful, and they go through some tough stuff, man. And I just have empathy, because when you, and it's not sympathy or pity, you will never find me going, oh, you poor thing. No, no, ever, ever. But I have the other, and that is empathy. Empathy is understanding what that other person has gone through, and that's what my hope is. Just that, it's it's just hope, encouragement, and also how to deal with discouragement and the other things that creep into our life every now and then. But I know I can't do it myself. I cannot do it myself, and I rely on a much better equipped higher power to help me with that. My life satisfaction would be, I would say 10. I would say 10. Um, and you're saying, well, how can it be a 10? And uh, then what are you going to strive for? Well, I'll make an 11 or a 12 or a 13. I'll take it all the way up to scale. I'll push the boundaries. I'll push the limits. But I almost am on the verge of, I guess you could describe, being so content, you know, in so many areas of my life. Now, does that motivate me? Well, yeah, I'm still motivated. I'm still encouraged. I still do have energy and motivation to do other things. But there's a piece in my life that I it's so hard to explain. Do I still worry? Oh, sure, I catch myself. Do I get depressed sometimes? Oh yeah, I get down. Absolutely. Do I feel like isolating at times? Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, but I'm also aware of it. The most important thing we can ever do in our life is develop self-awareness. The most important person in our life is you and I, and paying attention to us, learning about us, learning about me. How do I operate? Why do I get discouraged? What has made me angry? Am I depressed? Am I down? It's self awareness. And I do that every day. Now, I try to do it every day, I would say, you know, because I want to keep that 10, right? I want to maintain that 10. And I can't do it if I'm not fully aware of my surroundings and what impacts me. And so I try to do it on a fairly regular basis. Did I show love today? Did I was I discouraged? Was I hurt? Was I upset about anything? It's just taking an inventory, and we should do that every day. So if I'm going to maintain that and strive for that 10, then I have to put in the effort for me, because I can only take care of this heart of mine. And with God's help, I'll be all right.
So, what did you think? That was a very big turnaround.
Yes, I think for anyone who listened and heard how Craig started his journey, what happened to get him, as he called it, into the pit of hell, and then the redemption of it. It does, I mean, it feels like a complete sort of, I almost want to say like a phoenix rising, a rebirth. And when I think about that level of change, like we're talking sort of big macro change in your life, do you think you've ever gone through, or like could pinpoint something that was like that you've either for yourself or like you've seen someone else go through? Because I was just wondering how you even get to the point of wanting to change.
Well, so I don't think I know anybody, or even myself, right, to have gone through a change that could be like on par with Craig's. But I think people change out of inspiration or desperation, right? That's what I always tell people, because, you know, I help people kind of with their health and losing weight and all of that. And it's never because people don't, you know, the whole grass is greener on the other side thing. People can always see all the grass that is around them. But what makes you ultimately take a step towards it or away from something is always either because, you know, it's super attractive and you really, really want to go do that, or you're running away from pain. That's my take on it.
Yeah, I think when he said, like, the pain has to outweigh the fear.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you have to stop being scared. And you have to know that it hurts more than you are afraid.
Like, I mean, generally speaking, I think fear is a very human thing, right? Because it's about survival. And I think if you look at the whole fight or flight thing, when we were cavemen, if a lion is running at you, you better feel fear. Like, people who didn't feel fear then probably died, right? So I think fear and all the things that come with it, anxiety, stress, all of these things are very human. Instead of getting rid of fear, because I don't think it's possible unless you have something neurologically wrong with you. I don't think you can truly stop feeling fear, but it's facing it. You know, in Craig's situation, the fear of that lifestyle and what it could lead to, he faced up to it, you know, instead of just kind of sweeping it under the carpet and only looking at, I guess, the glamorous side or the financial side of what he was doing. He realized that there is a fear and he dealt with it by making a change.
Do you think we're less accepting of pain?
Yes.
Do we feel like we are the snowflake generation?
I think I would say you and I probably are more aware and more accepting of the presence of pain. I would say over time, I have trained myself up to be more okay with it. Not in terms of there is pain, I'll leave it there and accept it. But I no longer try to just take shortcuts to cover it up. Because there's a saying in Chinese, right? You can't wrap fire with paper. Right? And that's how I feel about pain, you know, and what's closer to, you know, my heart is physical pain. Right? Because over-the-counter medication have been around for a long time, but usually when your body has pain, it could be, you know, for people working at the office or sitting at a desk for prolonged periods, it could be pain in the back of your neck, it could be your back, it could be any of these things, right? People have RSI in their wrists. And I do see that a lot of people prioritizing productivity over health. So they would take Nurofen, right, to deal with the inflammation and keep doing what was hurting them. And don't even get me started on athletes, right? I think they actually have a better safety system where they have coaches and, you know, fellow athletes who will remind them, okay, you need to ice this or you need to go see a physio. They have the whole package. But for normal people, how many times have you heard people kind of jokingly say, oh, I sprained something at football or like did CrossFit and I hurt myself? They go back to it without dealing with the reason. And pain is a useful message from the body. And a lot of the time...
Well, it's alerting us, right?
Yeah.
It's alerting us to the fact that something is not right.
Yeah, and then you take a painkiller, which effectively is you saying to your body, oh, shush. Right? And yes, I understand a lot of people, you know, you need to put food on the table, whatever. Yes. But you need to realize that pain is the signal, but the problem hasn't gone away. Most things will recover in your body, but some things don't. So, yeah, I do think this generation, because we live such a fast life, if people get ill, before COVID, I already had the policy of, even if I had, sneezes or sniffles, I would say I'm not going into the office because why? I could,
yes,
if I
exactly.
could do my job at home and not spread it to other people by sneezing at their faces, why would I do that? But there is a kind of presenteeism, I think, especially around work.
It's interesting you say that. I remember somebody, I was very junior in my career, and this was a man who was very, very senior, had been very well respected. And he said this great anecdote. When he was fairly junior in his career, they were traveling, which, in what we do, that's pretty common during the week. And he got sick. Again, quite common. You get run down, when you're working. And his senior manager said to him, go home, rest, do not work. I don't want you to work because you will mess up, right? You will make a mistake in the state of being. And I won't remember that you were sick. I'll just remember that you messed up. And that's what I think is really important to remember, is the cogs generally don't stop turning for a day, regardless of who you are or what you do.
Yeah.
The world isn't going to end, but we have this fear, again, coming back to this word of, if I take the day off to rest, recover, come back healed, then I will be seen as weaker. I will be seen as somebody who doesn't value work and who puts their health first. Well, why shouldn't you put your health first? It's mind-blowing to me.
Yeah, because I would say in the workplace, even for people who are CEOs of companies and all of that, and people might want to virtually slap me for saying this, but work is just work. You are, however, rest in peace, Steve Jobs, right? He was a great icon, I would say, in the tech world. But when he passed, how quickly did someone replace him? And
yeah.
This is a stark example to give, right? Given that someone's passed away, but in work, we are all replaceable. And I think this is not to undermine ourselves or anyone, but work by its very nature is like that, right? And I think if people can normalize thinking like this, I'm not saying don't work hard, right? Give it your all when you're there, but don't be so afraid that, if you don't turn up to work for 5 days because you got ill, the company isn't going to go bust. Right? And this is a whole other conversation about the merits of delegation, I think, although it's slightly off topic. But I just think you are not irreplaceable in your personal life, with personal connections and all of that. That's not replaceable.
Oh, but Beyonce would say otherwise. To the left.
Don't wrong Beyonce, because then you are replaceable. Yeah, so I think pain is an interesting one. And the whole topic about, can women take more pain than men? I don't know if it's a fair comparison, because if we are built to take more, then we can.
And different kinds. We feel different kinds.
Yeah. I don't know. Neither of us have given birth, so we have no right to talk about it.
Have you seen the simulators that you can? Anyone can wear them, but men in particular can wear.
Yeah.
To feel.
What was the most painful thing you've experienced physically?
Physically, so I'm touching wood right now, but I've never broken anything or had any.
Yeah, me neither.
Very, sort of injuries that require hospitalization or anything like that. So I can't think of one particular thing that really causes me a lot of pain. I had a finger slice with a knife situation more than a couple of years ago. But it was more, I think, the shock of it than the pain.
Yeah, actually, that's true. I've touched wood as well. I've never broken anything. And not been in a lot of pain really recently. I would say migraines are a sucker. Like, migraines are horrible. I've had whiplash from a car accident, but even then it wasn't so bad. I had a finger slicing thing with a mandolin. That was quite bad, but I didn't need stitches, so it wasn't as bad as it could have been. But it was a shock.
Yeah, I hole punched by accident, obviously, a little bit of my finger one time when I was a child. Yeah, there's a little semicircle that got cut out from the top layer of my skin. So that was, yeah, now that you've told me about that, I remember.
And we both had nail problems. So when I was little, I think I must have told you about this, but when I was little, went bowling, and when you're a kid, you had the number 6 bowling balls, because they're the lightest one. They're the kiddie
I didn't know
size.
they had numbers.
They had different weights on them.
Yeah, they're cut all the colours are different weights, right?
Yeah, so there's one that's marked 6, and that's for kids, because that's the super light one. It must be 6 pounds, right? And then
that's probably what I use now. Let's be honest.
And then I got one actually because I was a child, right? I must have been 5 or 6. I picked one up thinking it was a 6, but actually it was a 9.
Oh,
right, and child brain. And so I picked it up and promptly dropped it because it was too heavy for me, and I dropped it on my finger. It's on my left side, the ring finger. And then obviously I exploded into tears because it was really quite painful. And people I was with, I was with family and family friends, and they all went and got a kind of cup of ice chips from the bar for me to dunk my finger in. And then I was I kept my finger in the ice, and that probably hurt as well because it was ice. It didn't really break anything, surprisingly. And also it didn't split any skin, but it was quite red and angry looking for a while. And by the time, it was during the summer, by the time I had got back to school, I still had to have it bandaged up. And eventually the nail fell off because it died, I guess, in the accident. And I grew a new nail. So that was pretty traumatic.
Yeah, I mean, I've had my own nail situation this year I dropped the base of a very heavy lamp on my toe.
That took
my big
so
toe.
long.
I mean, it's a good thing. I mean, our nails and hair grow very quickly.
Yeah.
We do lament this. So it's a very good thing that they do. But yeah, same situation. It just got very bruised. It did fall off. I do have a new nail, but it's fine. But yeah, I mean, the saga of that nail was daily updates, wasn't it, really, in our track?
Yeah. And there was quite a few petty manis after before I'd recovered.
Yeah, I mean, I still haven't gone to get a pedi with the new nail.
Oh, baby nail. But my last note on this, I just wanted to bring up how interesting it is that I would say half of pain is psychological. So the reason I say that is because when you see children, you know how toddlers just have a way of running and then falling on their faces? If you don't make a fuss, most of the time they just get up. They kind of look around, they're like, oh, I look a bit stupid or something, right? And then they just carry on. But if you make a huge fuss over them, they start crying as if it was super painful.
I agree. The reaction to pain, I think, is what feeds our own sort of consciousness of it.
Yeah, because, I mean, I've seen enough videos online of cats failing to make certain jumps and just falling onto the floor, and they don't cry over that.
Can cats cry?
I don't know.
Are they capable of tears?
I think dogs
There's a question.
can.
Dogs can cry. I've seen dog tears.
Oh, that's so sad. I think horses can as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. On that note, we'll see you next week.
Subscribe, rate and review on your favourite podcast platform, and follow us on Instagram at Culturally Speaking Podcast. You can also check out our website, culturallyspeaking.co.uk, for a transcript of this episode. Share your stories or your show ideas with us by sending us an email at theculturallyspeaking@gmail.com.